Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the NRW. I'm your host here, Rob Medina, and I thank you very much for joining me here today because today I'm going to be reviewing the movie In a New York Minute. I saw the trailer for this film as of this recording, I'm going to say a little less than 2 weeks ago, and I wanted to see the film right away. So I was lucky enough to get a screener for this movie, and I can truthfully say that I really did like the film up until the very end, which I'll be getting into in a little bit here with the review. But I'm going to point out that I'm not going to get into any spoilers here at all with this film because I think it's best for you to see how the story progresses along the way and the certain things that you discovered that kind of gives you a really unique perspective of each of these characters' story that you're following in this film that I think is really important for you to see as it unfolds rather than being told ahead of time about it here. But of course, I'll get into my plot here. I won't get into spoilers, as I mentioned before. I'll get into my positives, my negatives, and then my rating. In a New York Minute follows three strangers as they accidentally discover the solution to their problems lies in a single pregnancy test. Amy is haunted by a past breakup that has manifested into an eating disorder. Angel is caught up between a loveless marriage to an American businessman and a passionate affair with a Chinese writer. Nina moonlights as an escort in order to support herself. And that right there is the film in a nutshell, so now let's get into my positives. My first positive with this film is with actually the three characters' story that we follow in this movie, in Nina, Amy, and Angel. What I found really unique about these particular characters is that you're definitely getting three perspectives of each of these characters' backgrounds and how they have a view of themselves and how they have a view on life in general, I would think, when it comes to how they were raised and how they have in a lot of ways some sort of cultural differences given their background. So for example, like Amy, she's born and raised in America, so she's Chinese American. Her parents are pretty much traditional Chinese family, where they want their daughter meant to say, to marry a man, have children, and carry on the family legacy. Amy, on the other hand, is not really all about that. It's quite obvious that she's very much Americanized, and although she definitely does respect and care for her parents and doesn't necessarily agree with the traditional set of values that they want her to continue carrying, she just is not all about that, but she still respects her family. She still does love her family. And when they speak Chinese to her, she always responds back in English, which isn't uncommon though, but I just remember that being a distinct difference about, I'm not sure if that's done on purpose for the character's journey here, but I thought it was really unique in that respect. Nina, on the other hand, is the one character who is in a lot of ways in a unique position where I'm putting it like this. Amy's Americanized through and through. She's born and raised in America, still respects her family, still has a strong connection with her family, loves her family, of course. But Nina, on the other hand, being born and raised in China up to a certain point and then came to America at a fairly young age, she's the one that's like right in that borderline of like where she is still very much invested in the Chinese culture and very much invested in the American culture as well too. But there's a problem that she has with her family where they clearly she is not the favorite of the two, because she has a brother as well too in the film, and she has been bestowed on these responsibilities that she does not want to take, where her family are obligating her to do certain things to not dishonor the family. So for example, going out with a guy, you got to get permission, and she's got to get the approval of her family, especially her father, who is not well according to her mother. As she's trying to, get herself out of this situation here, where she feels like she's not going anywhere because no one is giving her any proper attention, any room to develop. She's taking on this escorting job to get money to be able to leave the situation that she's in. And it looks like she's doing fairly well, but she's hiding all this from her family because she knows that once they find out what she's doing, that they are going to ask for all this money, and she has a problem with how they're handling certain things. So you get that story where you see someone who's right in the middle when it comes to both sides of the cultures, if you will. Angel, on the other hand, born and raised in China, coming to America later in life, where she meets an American businessman and marries him, it's clearly obviously these guys don't have anything in common with each other, and that there is no love between them. All right, but she's trying to find a connection with him, but it's not going anywhere, and she ends up having an affair with a Chinese writer played by Ludi Lin, who was in the last Mortal Kombat film, who I thought was great in the movie too. She is someone who, out of the three characters, has no one here as far as family is concerned. She's pretty much all on her own. And what I found unique about the affair that she's having with Ludi Lin's character is that is like really her one connection to China. So I think like there's a little piece of home with him that she definitely has with him, and he gives her the attention that her American husband does not. And she definitely does feel that love and connection with him, and clearly he does have feelings for her as well too. But you notice right away, at least I would say not right away, but later on, that they're not in the same mindset as far as how she wants to go about with the relationship and how he wants to go about relationships. See, he's clearly very much focusing on himself, but does have feelings for Angel. Whereas Angel, on the other hand, saying, I'm willing to leave my husband right now and be with you because I love you. And he does love her too, but you can see that, again, he has other goals in mind that Angel's clearly not a priority for him. And it's quite obvious here, but again, he still has strong feelings for her. And that's the one thing about this story that I truly did admire about the different perspective that you get from each of these characters. And you actually do get to spend time with each character to really understand where they're coming from and how they turn out the way that they've turned out. But also at the same time, the new set of hurdles they're having to overcome along the way, that you're starting to see how they handle themselves based upon their upbringing, if that makes any sense. For example, for the character of Angel, there's a part of the movie where her husband, who had been married before, has children, and his children had come over to their home and they're having dinner. In the scene, he was talking to his children about the food that his wife was making, and they were comparing her food to I think it was a Thai place, if I'm not mistaken, where they were saying that food is really good, almost disregarding the amount of work that she put and effort she put into making the food that she made for the family, which I believe is a traditional Chinese dish, if I'm not mistaken. And clearly she took that as an insult, because you can see that she was affected by the comments that they were making about, oh, this food is amazing at this restaurant, it's a Thai food restaurant, and so on and so forth. And here she is busting her ass and making this delicious meal for the family, and they seem to be kind of like dismissive about her cooking. And then there's a part of the movie too where, in that scene I have to say, where she was washing the dishes, and her husband's daughter walks into the kitchen where she's washing the dishes and says, why are you washing the dishes? And she says, I think something to the effect of, well, it's my duty. He said, well, you do know you have a dishwasher. Why don't you just use the dishwasher? And kind of being condescending with her about it. And then her Angel's husband was like, I can't recall what he said exactly off the top of my head here, but he wasn't very helpful in the situation and trying to say, hey, listen, just leave her alone. Don't bother her. But instead it was just more like, something to the effect of like being very dismissive towards her, and didn't give her much thought into it, and then just told his kids rather, let's come out here and do this instead, and left her alone in the kitchen. So again, there's that big disconnect between the two couples there. But you can clearly see that no one really respects her at all, and I can see why she had this affair and is in love with this man who clearly has given her all the attention and showing her respect, showing her love, listening to her, up until you see where he's at with himself and what he is prioritizing over her, which is where you're starting to see her as a person, where she's having to learn how to deal with that loneliness in her way, of course. So there's a lot of things about this film that I truly do believe that was done very well in that respect when it came to telling the story between these three women here, and having this one pregnancy test here that more or less connects everybody here with this story that we're following. And under the directing of Ximin Lee, who is making her directorial debut with this film, and I believe this movie is based on a short story of the same name, I think she did a wonderful job with this film and directing the movie. She definitely does a really good job in just letting the story play itself out, and you have time to spend with the characters and really understanding their background and really understanding who they are as individuals at that moment in time, and then seeing how things get worse and worse along the way for certain characters, some worse than others, and how they're learning to deal with that as it progresses from there. And then the consequences of those actions that they commit along the way too, which I thought was done rather beautifully in my opinion. The cinematography in this movie looks wonderful as well too. One thing I want to point about this movie is that you definitely get to see how these women are being taken advantage of, and each of them from different perspective here when it comes to how they're being taken advantage of. For example, like the character of Angel, she's an actress who was actually famous over in China, working on a reality show, if I recall correctly, and then coming over to the United States, she's trying to get into the entertainment business and in acting. And she's definitely going through some personal issues, of course, that you follow on the way, but you're clearly also seeing the fact that she's very much a team player, and she's very reliable. If you need her to do something, she'll do it in a heartbeat to help out with the production. In this case, there was a certain production that she was a part of here, where Amy was actually a part of as well too. But given that she had passed out from the eating disorder that she had developed, they needed someone to fill in at the last minute, and they had asked Angel to do so. But they had told her that, by the way, just to let you know, there is no overtime, so you're not going to get paid for this here. Are you okay with it? And she said, yeah, sure, no problem. And then the producer's reaction is more like, yes. When I saw that, I was like, yeah, I've seen that before, because I have seen that before quite often with a lot of people taking advantage of foreigners in that respect, with not knowing how things actually work, and they're using their lack of knowledge to take advantage of them. I've seen that happen many times here, and when I saw that, man, that brought back a lot of memories for me about how I've seen that occur right in front of my eyes. But that was one thing about the film that I truly did appreciate, in showcasing the realities of that, and how a lot of people just aren't aware of it. And then as they learn along the way, they figured out that, okay, I got to be more careful about what I do moving forward here, depending on the circumstances, of course. But then when you get the character of Nina, clearly she's someone that has been taken advantage of in a lot of ways, primarily how her family have treated her. And that's a different perspective on how you get to see in that respect, and how those traditional set of values in the culture definitely do have some flaws. I'm not here to judge anybody here, because a lot of the things that I saw with each of these characters here are very much similar to how I remember growing up as a kid in my Hispanic culture, where I thought this is very similar to what I've seen before. So I don't think that you don't have to be Chinese to watch the film and say, I understand all that, sir. You can be Hispanic, African American, Polish. You can be from any part of the world, and you see this story here, and there's a lot of similarities with everybody that have those similar backgrounds here that can relate to what's going on here. And I think that seeing it from from these three women's eyes, with their respective backgrounds here in the Chinese culture, is definitely unique in that respect. But anyone can relate to this here, and I can tell you right now that every single aspect of these characters' story, I relate to them through and through. Some ways more than others, and others I was just a little not as privy to that I had learned along the way in seeing these women's stories as it's been presented in front of me here. But I just remember thinking that there is so much that I had connected with here in so many ways, that I truly understood what these women were going through here. But I think for me, this will be the end of my negatives, because I meant to say the positives, but there's so much about this film that I can certainly get into here, but a lot of it does have to do with that spoiler territory that I just don't want to get into at all, because I think as you watch the film progress along the way, there's certain things you will discover that will hopefully open up your eyes and help you understand and appreciate these characters' journey here, and what they have to go through, and what they have gone through, and what they must do to more or less overcome these hurdles that are presented here. So that will be the end of my positives. So now let's get into my negatives. The first negative I'm going to point out here actually does have to do with the ending. I really loved where the direction the story was going with all three of these characters here. I really, really did. I thought that there was a big build-up to something that was going to be, what's the best way I could describe it? That was going to be very effective and compelling, and just have a really proper closure. Or maybe not say a proper closure, but more or less like a something to leave you thinking with here. Unfortunately for me, the way the film ends rather abruptly. I felt like with everything that was going on with each of these characters' story here, without revealing anything about what actually happens towards the end of the film, there was something that was missing for me, where you have this wonderful story that I was seeing here, and then the payoff isn't there. I don't have any issues with regards to how certain stories end on a positive note or a negative note or an ambiguous note. This movie ends, without revealing anything here, but it closes on a note where we can figure out where each of these stories are going to be heading at least with the character's journey. And the way that it was handled here for me personally just was too rushed for me, in my opinion. So that was a big sticking point for me here. The next negative for me does have to do with the pacing for this movie. Although I do feel like that you do get proper time to spend with the characters, and you do, something about the way that it was paced and handled in certain scenes without getting into spoilers here just didn't work for me all that well. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of moments where you do get to spend time with the characters and truly understand who they are as individuals and understand their story. But I actually felt like there was something missing about me to fully connect with the characters themselves. Not with the journey, but just with the characters, because I truly felt like there were wonderful moments that worked so well, and then all of a sudden it just kind of trailed off and didn't necessarily work all that well for me. Again, without getting into spoilers here, but I do believe though that the story is still effective and strong enough that it definitely, the positive for me in that respect certainly outweighed the negatives. It's kind of hard for me to explain without really delving into the spoilership, because that's where all that kind of comes from here, where I just felt like there were certain story beats that worked very well and it got to a good point in the story, and then it just kind of trailed off, and then it did go somewhere, but the way it was executed didn't work all that well for me. But again, the positive in that respect did outweigh the negatives, but it was kind of a sticking point here for me. And that right there is going to be it for my negatives. So now let's get into my rating. Now, I really did like the movie. I actually quite liked it a lot. But even as I was doing this review, there are certain things about the film that I remember as I'm thinking about it again. The positive, in my opinion, does certainly outweigh the negatives, but it's coming so close here that I felt like the biggest issue that I have with the film, now that I think about it, is that there's a build up to the story that it was getting really, really good, and then it just didn't really go anywhere for me. But I will also point out too that even though I had a problem with the film in that respect, especially towards the end, that was my biggest problem with the movie, I actually still enjoyed the film quite a lot up to those certain points of the movie. And again, a lot of the things that had occurred that I had problems with here are in that spoiler territory. But I do plan on going back and watching the film, because this movie is going to be released on VOD on May 3rd. So I do urge you guys to check it out here. But I'm hoping that upon repeat viewing that I will find something about the film that I probably didn't catch the first time around that may change my perception on the film upon second, hopefully third and fourth viewing, that I can take away from it here, because I think this is one of those films that definitely does require multiple viewings for you to really let certain things sink in that probably didn't catch, that you probably wouldn't have caught the first, second, third, fourth time around here. So with my rating, that's a tough one, because there is one that I was going to go with here, but I'm just kind of teeter-tottering about how I feel about the film. But as of right now, I'm going to say this movie is a raise a glass. And those are my thoughts on the film. And as I mentioned before, the movie's going to be released on VOD on May 3rd. So if you have seen the movie, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel. Make sure you share and like our videos and hit the notification bell while you're down there. Follow us on our social media accounts on Instagram, New Release Wednesdays, on Facebook, Nerds Rule the World, and on Twitter @TheNRW. Follow me on my social media accounts on Instagram and Twitter, Mr. Rob Medina, and on Facebook, simply just Rob Medina. And I have a show on the channel called You're So Cool with Rob Medina, and I have social media for the show as well too. On Instagram, You're So Cool with Rob Medina, and on Twitter, You're So Cool WRM. And I want to thank you all very much for checking out my review. Hope you guys enjoyed. Until next time, stay safe out there, and cheers.